Hi, I'm John Mark. Welcome to the Beaten Zone. This podcast is about war, not from the top down, but from the ground up. It's about unearthing personal truths of war, its costs, and how it shapes the lives of the people who experienced it firsthand. When asked about how he wanted his final at bat of his legendary career to play out, the great George Brett answered, I want to hit a routine ground ball to second base, bust my butt down the line, and get thrown out by a step. So young players will see it and say, that's how you play the game. I first heard about this quote from our guest, who was my boss during the final year of his career. With retirement on the radar, our guest operated at one speed, and that's all out. In my 24 years, I never saw anyone treat his final day in the Army like it was his first. Mike Hastings loved soldiering and was one of the most dedicated leaders with whom I served. A career infantry officer, Mike graduated from the Citadel and found himself leading troops in many hotspots, including the Sinai and Kosovo. Mike also deployed to Iraq twice, where he led planning for the 173rd Airborne Brigade's seizure of the former Bashur Air Base during the coalition's initial entry into theater. This operation was the first large-scale airborne operation conducted by the United States since Operation Just Cause. It had the effect of fixing 6 Iraqi divisions, denying them the ability to reinforce the defense of Baghdad as coalition forces advanced towards the capital. We are very lucky to have Mike share an insider's perspective on the planning and execution of that operation. Lots of really interesting background and color. Mike also served in the 4th Battalion, 9th Infantry Regiment during the surge. During that tour, Mike's unit was charged with establishing security in an al-Qaeda in Iraq stronghold of Tarimiyah, a key area north of Baghdad. He also operated a number of areas in Diyala province in the western desert of Iraq. Mike retired from the Army in 2014 and now lives in South Carolina, but he still lives by the values that characterized his service. He will talk about his career, experiences during operations, and his transition to civilian life. And now, my mentor, friend, and all-around good dude, Mike Hastings. All right, Mike, man, it's great to have you here. You're the first guest that I've had on that was not only a friend, not only a teammate, but was also my boss. So I look forward to, I'm enjoying this like reverse power dynamic here where I get to set the tone versus you setting the tone for me. It's nice. It's refreshing for me.
Okay. No, it's okay. I'm flattered beyond words. I tell you, it's great to reconnect to. And yeah, that is kind of funny because I'm sweating bullets, oh my God. What's he going to throw at me? Dance. Answer questions. Yeah. So good. Let's go. Bring it.
Let's go, baby. So we're going to go ahead and kind of launch into it. We're really going to start with your origin story.
Okay.
And, the typical question, like what made you want to join the Army?
Yeah, that's, there's always somebody in your life that is influential, immediate family member or, a coach or something like that. So my dad was a traveling salesman and he was gone like 5-6 days of the week. But when he'd come home on the weekends, our thing was to stay up late and watch movies. And this was starting, when I was a kid, like 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. I used to wait for him to drive. He would drive to 10 states. So we'd typically watch a movie, and a war movie would invariably be on, right? Something, right? Just some kind of war movie. Well, he did 4 years in the Army. And just hearing his stories, I was fascinated by the stuff that he would tell me. He was in the late 50s, early 60s. So post-Korea, Vietnam, not really so much. They were actually training Cubans at Fort Benning. He was infantry as well. But I hung on his every word. Everything he told me, I just thought was just so cool. Just all the stuff that he did at Benning and how they trained and going out in the field and just the camaraderie with the guys and the stuff that they did. I couldn't get enough. I could not get enough of what he would tell me. And of course, you're watching a war movie. Dad, is that accurate? Did they do that stuff? And, a lot of stuff, because it was a Vietnam or World War II movie. But that really sunk the hook into me. Just the bonding and staying up until 2:00 in the morning with your old man talking about war movies or his experience in the Army. Yeah, that's where it started for sure. 100%.
Awesome. And so at some point you decided that you wanted to go to college and go to the Army, and you chose the Citadel. So I think most folks probably know about the Citadel, but maybe tell us a little bit about it and why you went there.
Yeah. Okay. So, Right. The Citadel Military College is as it says, is a military college in Charleston, South Carolina, founded pre-Civil War as an academy. Not to go back into a history lesson, but there were a few military academies across the South in the 80s, 30s, and 50s that were founded kind of as a precautionary measure because of, if you recall, Denmark Vesey, there was a slave uprising, and people were pretty concerned about that. So they wanted to have these military academies in some of these larger cities. Columbia had one as well. And it wasn't a college initially. It was just an academy for cadets to drill and things like that, and kind of a localized militia. It became a college a little bit later. Long story short, how did I get there? So in high school, fairly aimless young man. I loved football, and I just wanted to play football in college. I didn't really think beyond my nose. So I went to a junior college back in Missouri because I got a scholarship to play ball, and I thought that was great. Like, and I'm sure you know this, and a lot of people listening to this know. There's a lot of guys that go to junior college for football and get picked up to a Division I school, or maybe even not, a big school, but that's where they get exposure if they don't get it in high school. Well, that was my plan. I just wanted to play football. I loved it, and eventually I was probably going to go to the University of Missouri because that's where I'm from. Well, I'm at this junior college playing ball, and one of my teammates does a visit to the Citadel. I'm a freshman already in college, and he goes, and I'm like, what's this? I've never heard of it. I'm in Missouri. There's no internet. What's the Citadel? He's like, dude, oh, hell no. He came back terrified, eyes wide, like, because he wanted to go in the military. He was in ROTC, and he was like, yeah, man, he was all pumped up. He was going to go there. He came back. So, well, why are you terrible? Why are you, that intrigued me. Why are you scared? Why are you afraid? What happened? What'd they do to you? They do a weekend where you stay with with another freshman. They call them knobs there. And you kind of go through the weekend as a fourth classman. So he experienced that and all the drama that goes with it, as you can imagine, with the fourth class system. And he just said, dude, you don't even know what goes on down there. Well, then I was hooked. I had to do more research. I read the book, Lords of Discipline. After that, he's like, here, he tossed me this faded, torn up copy. And I, like 4 days, burned through this book. I got to go there. I got to go there, man. I applied in April. I was accepted in May. I showed up in August. I never visited it. I never stepped foot in South Carolina, let alone Charleston. And I started over. I burned a years in a JUCO, but I started because I wanted to go there. And distinctly remember landing in Charleston and just a wave of humidity hitting me in August, and just hot and sticky. And it was kind of, if I'm telling you too much, but it was just kind of like a little bit of this guy driving the shuttle. He could tell because he saw that you were supposed to report with duffel bags, Army duffel bags, and just very minimalistic. And I tried to have like a military haircut. I didn't know what I was doing. He's like, you going to the Citadel? Yes, sir. Like, he opened up his back, get in. So I'm getting in. There's 3 other guys in there, like, big wide-eyed looking around, like nervous, kind of shaking. And I'll never forget this. It starts pouring rain.
Of course.
And he's playing Heartbreak Hotel from Elvis Presley on the way. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I will never in my life forget that. He drops us off, pouring rain. Heartbreak Hotel is playing. And I've dropped off in front of my battalion. I'm like,
here we go.
Can we go to we should have stopped at, Wendy's or something on the way in, because it straight sucked for like the next several months. But anyway.
Did you play sports? Did you play ball while you were there, or did you do ROTC scholarship? How
Yeah, my intent was to walk on. So I reached out to the coach, and he said, hey, man, it's so late. Or, no, man. He was like, hey, partner, saw your tape. You'll be a recruited walk-on. And you can come out in the fall, show up, go through the whatever, the hell week and all that stuff, and then come out for practice and you'll be a recruited walk-on. Well, you can probably relate to this. Core squad athletes are looked at differently. And when I was going through cadre, and I did everything they told me to do. They're like, you're going to do what? You're going to play football? You dirtbag, I got so much hell for saying I wanted to be a football player. John Mark, at that time, I was like 235. I was a big dude, 6'3", 235, like outside linebacker. And, the question was like, what are you big, in my face? Like, what are you here for? What are you here? Oh, sir, I want to play football, sir. just step back, turd, you could do that next year, that kind of crap. So
Yep.
I didn't play. I didn't go out for, whatever. I didn't want to be that guy and leave my classmates. And I ate it up like, okay, I'm gonna stick with my guys. And I mean, that sounds crazy, but I was very heavily influenced by not trying to be seen as getting out of anything. So I got turned on to rugby, and then I
Yep.
got turned into the ROTC program, and there, that was a whole different story. Kind of bit into it.
I already know the answer to this question just because I know you so well, and you just told your origin story of why you went to the Citadel, but why the infantry?
Yeah, great.
Because it was the hardest, right?
Yeah, it's because because I'm not cut out for anything else. No, probably the seed was planted by my father, because he was at Benning and just telling me the stories about the School of Infantry in they do Ranger demonstrations, and and Airborne School was there, and he'd tell stories about that, and I was just eating it up. There was a staff sergeant at the Citadel who had just come from 1st Ranger Battalion. So this is late 80s. And these guys were this in your mind's eye, if you want to picture, and of course this is burned into my hard drive. Spits and starches, OG Green 107s, black beret, high and tight, a physical mutant, combat jump in Grenada, scuba, master rated, the perfect soldier. He was a recruiting poster. And he taught ROTC, and he taught they have a ranger club, and you go out in the woods and do patrolling. I worshiped that guy. That's what I want to be. I want to be that guy. Everything he did, we hung on his every word, right? I mean, didn't even know really Ranger, kind of know what that stuff is, kind of talked to him, and he understood his role. You get a lot of guys that kind of fucking cadets, shut the fuck, that kind of unbelievably professional. He was a walking, like I said, a recruiting poster, standing at attention for lieutenants, standing at attention for no surly attitude. Everything he did was perfection. I swear to God, I think the guy could run backwards doing a 5:30 mile. He just a maniac. And then, he did his whatever 2-3 years, then went back to Ranger Regiment. I think he got hurt or something. I don't know why he was in RTC, but he was heavily influential in not only me, but a lot of guys. The hook was sunk. I'm like, I got to do that, man. I want to be around those guys. So
what a blessing, man, to have someone like that in your life at a very early age to model the standard for you, right? Like that, I think about it all the time, like cadets, new lieutenants, new NCOs, whose first introduction to leadership is a shit bag. That is terrible. It is criminal. You have such a negative impact on someone's life, and to have someone like that at a very early stage, setting your course, setting the type of person you're going to be, is such a blessing.
For sure. I completely agree. And John Mark, I don't mean to belabor this, but I'm telling you, for 25 years and after that, we're all shaped by the guys we worked with, right? Then you try and take bits and pieces of them, even at Corps, even in battalion command, wherever. How he treated people, how he acted as a professional, how he didn't raise his voice, how he would give him his time and take extra effort to whatever it was, whoever, he would stay late with anyone. He would come into barracks and show guys how to pack their rucksack and see goofy stuff. You think that's not, but I swear, I think he spent 18 hours a day there just developing. And that was to your point. I've met a few, definitely top 5 most influential and professional soldiers I've ever been around in my life. I wish I would have kept in contact with them, but you moved on and upward.
Yeah. It's the way it is, man. The 90% of the relationships we have, that's what happens, and people don't realize, because we lose contact with one another, the impact that they had on your life.
Yes.
One of the things we're trying to do with this project is to build a community of interest. People reconnect people. It's already happened. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to go off script a little bit and skip a little forward. You were, and we'll talk about this briefly because I really want to get to your operational experience, but you were a battalion commander for a basic training unit. Is my memory serves me correctly? How did that experience with your ROTC instructor shape the way that you carried that out? Because you're not like you're not like a drill sergeant. You're not like working with them every single day, but you were in a very influential spot. So did you carry some of those lessons forward into that role?
That's a really good question. My interaction with the trainees, my touches with them, the obvious, right? Physical training, going out there, setting the example, letting them see the old man, talking
Mhm.
to them or whatever, or arrange, to visit training with the command sergeant major. But that is a 100% non-commissioned officer. That's their business. That's what they do.
Yep.
I'm not a trainer. I'm not
Right.
there to. So I saw my role as, because they couldn't comprehend what is so natural to us to understand. They couldn't fathom battalion,
Yeah.
brigade, regiment. That
Right.
doesn't their platoon is like the big. Well, I'm in Alpha Company, and I'm in third platoon. That's about the extent of it. Of course, I knew that they were in, either 219 or 150, later. But I was an old guy who just kind of hands on hips or word of encouragement. But with when you're talking specifically with the trainees, with the new privates, setting the example, right?
Yep.
That what an officer does, and through the young company commanders, those were junior company commanders. They were
Yep.
freshly minted captains before they went to the career course, and how I interacted with them in my professional dealings with the non-commissioned officers. To your again back to Staff Sergeant Robert Knight and ROTC, how I talked to them, how I treated them. Absolutely, I was 100% professional. I wanted one of those young privates to understand this is how the Army runs. This is how what I should expect, the perfect model when I move on to my next assignment. So yes, I was very conscious of how I behaved and how I carried myself there
Yeah.
up on Sale Hill. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's why they put you there. And I remember like going into your office and you always like were open to I was probably the biggest smart ass in your on your team. And you were always open to a humor, a little humor. But I always knew when I went to your office, like it was gonna be deadpan, like we're here to talk business, do your business and get the heck out like as soon as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
And you always come across as a guy that always is very professional. It's let's get what we need to get done. And so that to me is like my experience, like a guy who is very fit, who's very professional, who works extremely hard, does hard things, shields the team from a lot of stuff. I saw you put a lot on yourself. You just come across as a guy that likes to just carry forward your duties in a very professional and serious manner always. So it doesn't surprise me that your first exposure to a really professional NCO like Staff Sergeant Knight doesn't surprise me as part of your origin story because that's who you were throughout your career. And I know you don't like talking about yourself, so I do want to talk a little bit about Ranger School. I
Okay.
know that you talked a lot about it when we were at Bragg together and how important it was to you as an officer, as an individual. But it is a seminal part of like an officer's education, an infantry officer's education. So what was the biggest thing that you learned about yourself there? Like what was the big teaching point from Ranger School?
Yeah. That's it's a very to boil it down to one thing. You can walk away with if you don't walk away with more than one lesson from that course, then you're not paying attention and you're just there to check a block. I think, looking back, and in a month you'll ask me and I'll have a different opinion, or a year
Mhm.
ago, 10 years ago, or fresh out of the school even, back in 1992 when I just graduated, my answer would be completely different. But I think more than anything, what I reflect upon is, and it's probably a poor choice of words, but mission accomplishment. Accomplish the mission. Not at the expense of your subordinates or men, but above all else, kind of goes back to that we were talking about earlier. Never quit. Never, 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 never quit. If there's one guy left, yeah, I mean, in the creed, accomplish the mission. Make it happen. Make it happen. If you've blown the deadline, if you've blown the time, oh, the time hack's gone. I'm lost. I lost my. There's no excuses. Figure it out. Use your brain. And I think that that's they try to instill upon you, right? Is one of the things, one of the teaching moments is it's all going to go to crap. You're going to have terrible weather. You're going to be hungry. You're going to lose a weapon. Everything's going to go to crap. You're going to lose comms. Your radio fill is going to go shit. Make it happen. That's why you're
Yep.
there. Solve it and go. And I think that that's one of the biggest takeaways. I know it's a very
Nice.
simplified answer, but
Yeah. Um, well, Mike, we're going to go ahead and pivot now towards your kind of your operational experience. And I always thought going to Korea as a lieutenant, which is what I did, was a great place to cut my teeth because I was away from family, I was away from friends, and I was in an operational area where I was focused on training, focused on the mission. You had a very similar sort of situation. You went to the Sinai, and I think a lot of our viewers, they don't know much about Task Force Sinai. So can you talk to us a little bit about the mission?
Sure, yeah. So the multinational forces and observers, that is the result of the 1979 peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. It was brokered by the United States. Um, so not to go back, you can look this all up. But after the 73 war, there was kind of a constant state of war that Israel seized the Sinai Desert, which was originally a part of Egypt. That was Egypt's territory. Israel seized the whole big chunk of the Sinai and closed down the Suez Canal. To President Carter, former President Carter's credit, he brokered a peace deal between the two countries in 79. Well, over the course of 2 years, the United Nations Security Council wouldn't authorize to send troops there. For whatever reason, they just never authorized UN Blue Hats to go there. So they had to come up with a alternate method, and they came up with the multinational forces observers, 14 member nations. The United States probably contributes. I think they still do the largest amount in the Sinai. It's like broken down into 4 zones. So you got everything from Fijians, Colombians, Danes, Norwegians. It's a kludge of countries and not all are NATO members. Again, Colombia, Fiji, things like that. So a 6-month rotation with your infantry battalion, all light weapons, no anti-tank, no heavy weapon systems. It's just nothing greater than 7.62. And you occupy observation posts in the Sinai Desert, and you observe and report. Nothing else. You're not an offensive force. You're just observing, kind of counting trucks that go by, both Israeli and Egyptian. So, yeah, that was my first deployment, January of 93 to July of 93.
What was your day-to-day, Mike? Were you a platoon leader? Or what was kind of your day-to-day?
I was a platoon leader. So what they do, and I don't know if they do this anymore, a battalion would be given a sector, and you'd have X amount of observation posts to occupy. And an observation post would be, so really your platoons were kind of broken up. You were given an OP, and some OPs had a squad and a squad plus, maybe 2 squads, or a platoon minus. Some just had a squad. So really, even though I was a platoon leader when we were back, so you do like a 3-week rotation out on the OP, and you're literally out there with just Lieutenant Hastings and a rifle squad occupying an observation post. And again, I'm sure they're far more built up than they were back then. They were very infantile regarding force protection. It was cinder block and sandbags and a tower. It was really, it was a gesture. Now I haven't looked now. I'm sure it's much, much different because heck, ISIS is running around in the Sinai Desert. But you go out for 3 weeks, you come back for 3 weeks. So you'd be swapping out with another rifle company. So I was in, whatever, A company, you're going to get relieved by B company, and C company's on training. So you go back to this place called South Camp, and you do live. We did squad live fires. We did proficiency ranges, fire team and squad live fires. We did a lot. We did EIB while we were there. So,
and you were in the 82nd, right? So did you guys jump while you were there too? Take advantage of the
No, there were no jumps. They were trying to. That's a great question. I remember distinctly our battalion commander trying to set something up with the Israelis, but the Egyptians didn't buy off on it, and you had to pass everything through MFO headquarters, and they wanted us to this very neutral presence, and the Egyptians they winced. Yeah, no. So that didn't happen.
Yeah. Now, serving in the MFO, that's flagged as an MFO command. I mean, the Americans have a reputation of not playing nicely in those sorts of organizations, right? I mean, did you experience like friction, like between national interest and international command interest?
Yeah, that's funny. The MFO at the time, later, yes, but in 1993, Desert Storm, 2 years, 18 months behind us. At that point, there wasn't much friction. We were working with, Fiji back. The Fijians are probably the nicest people on the planet. They're so cool. And the New Zealanders, we had New Zealand and Colombia, so we got along fairly well with those guys. And like I told you, I was big into rugby, so I was playing rugby with the Fijians. I had a blast. I had a really good time professionally and just overall. I enjoyed the MFO tour back then. Of course, 30 years later, I know it's drastically changed, but there wasn't much of that. There was a little bit of friction. If I'm going to speak frank with you, there were bars on South Camp, and it was 25-cent beers and 50-cent shots.
Man,
So if you can
what could
imagine,
possibly go wrong?
everything so you were in Sharm el Sheikh, Egypt, and it's not like soldiers were going downtown. You couldn't go out. You could go out to get something to eat and have a few beer, but non-commissioned officers kept a pretty tight rein.
Yep.
Now the boys coming back in the barracks and things like that. I mean, you were living in like a very similar to a CHU type environment. You had your own either a 2-man room or 1-man room, depending on your rank and all that kind of stuff. Long story short, when you get alcohol involved, and you're in a bar with some New Zealanders or Australians, and you start beating your gums when you're throwing darts or playing pool. Sometimes things get said that you wish you hadn't had said, and
Right.
a little bit of scrapping. Nothing too major. Nothing too, but that kind of stuff. No international incidents. Let's put it that way. But all in good fun.
That's cool. It sounds like a great environment to really take your platoon and go out and really focus on a real world mission, an important mission, and also do a lot of training, stuff that you probably wouldn't normally have the opportunity to do if you were back at Fort Bragg, which,
Yes.
Fort Bragg is places where units train, but
Right.
you're really hyper focused on readiness there. And I bet you guys came back pretty shit hot from that deployment.
We were, I'll tell you, to your point, yes, because we got to do a large volume of small unit training. So when you're back at South Camp, not just live fires, fire team and squad live fires, which we did a lot of those, but even navigation in the desert at night and things that you don't pay dividends later. When you're on Fort Bragg and you're in a pine forest, a lot different terrain when you're in a rocky environment. If you've ever looked at the Sinai Desert, it looks like the landscape of Mars. And under nods, we were infantile in our usage of that stuff and trying to navigate and moving in just fire team wedges at night under nods. Now, really good training, very good training, and some other stuff that pay dividends later. That I think I reflect back, to my time in Iraq that could help just culturally working with the Egyptians, because every single day I had interactions with the Israelis and the Egyptians on my OP, not to detract, every single day. And my job was to, just like this, have conversations, sit across from my counterpart, a lieutenant in the Egyptian army who spoke pretty good English, and all the Israelis do. So I'd literally border hop. I just cross over into Israel, into Eilat, and hang out with the Israelis and go into town or come back over to the Egyptian side and talk to those guys and learn about where they were from and their families and things like that. It was great as a 23-year-old lieutenant. Just the exposure, the broadening of it. I thought it was incredible. Yeah.
That's awesome. No, I mean, that's great. So as it turned out, your next operational deployment was Kosovo. And that's an interesting fit because you're kind of doing that in the Sinai, right? Some of the same things. But can you tell us a little bit about your mission and kind of your role while you were there?
So Kosovo. It was in Germany, assigned to Germany to the headquarters company. I was the headquarters company commander of the Allied Command Europe Mobile Forces. Doesn't even exist anymore. So ACE Mobile or AMFL. You've got the ARC, the Allied Rapid Reaction Corps, which is the armor side, and it used to have the AMFL, which was the light infantry side. The old CTAF Infantry Brigade was a part of that. The Brits offered up one of their para battalions, the Norwegians. Anyway, long story short, I was the headquarters company commander, and I had about 150 soldiers, 2 rifle platoons. It was a very weird organization. Well, non-standard MTO. Two rifle platoons, a transportation platoon, like a support platoon that had cooks and mechanics, because we would move and secure the 2-star headquarters. So whenever they had to do a jump talk or set up their talk on exercise, or when we deployed to Kosovo, they had to have security and movement, and we had to feed them. And when we were operationally deployed, I'd have a German signal platoon attached to me, and then I was given a Dutch mortar platoon. So I had this large kind of force of different animals, right? The Dutch and the Germans, and then I worked for a British 2-star, and I had my direct boss was a Canadian. It was an interesting situation there at the AMFL. But long story short, yeah, I'll get back on track, land the plane here. So the Kosovo War started in 98. The Serbs were oppressing the Kosovar Albanians, and there was, extrajudicial killing. Started a humanitarian crisis. Hundreds of thousands of Kosovar Albanians started fleeing back over to Albania or into other countries. NATO gave them an ultimatum, the Serbs, if you recall, and hey, if you don't stop Slobodan Milosevic, we're going to intervene. Well, he called a bluff. Thus began the air campaign, the 70-some-day air campaign, and NATO went to war, and I was a part of NATO. So the AMFL, their job was to set up a headquarters in Albania, Durrës, Albania, and their job was initially secure all refugee camps, right? Because there was, I think, close to 1,000 refugees coming streaming across the border, and Albania 25 years ago was the poorest nation in Europe. It was just, I'd never seen poverty like I saw, even in Iraq, like I saw in Albania. It was unbelievably just, it was, I'd never in my life experienced anything like that. So they were overwhelming. It was only a country of 2.5 million people. And if you can imagine 400,000 more people coming in that needed food, clothing, shelter, in winter, they were just coming out of winter. So long story short, AMFL was responsible for setting up camps, counting noses, screening people, and then getting ready for eventually the repatriation of these folks back to Kosovo once the ground forces went in, which knows when that was going to be. Ended up being in June, and then we went into Kosovo.
A lot of folk, I came into the Army when this was all kicking off. And so for me, this was like the big thing to do. This is the thing to get ramped up for, right? But I think a lot of our listeners probably just don't know much about the mission. And so unlike with the Sinai, like you came in through a long existing structure that had been in place for almost 23 years at that point, 20 years. But with this is truly an expeditionary type of thing. And you're coming into an area that's coming in contact with people that have experienced genocide. I mean, how impactful was that to interact with those people and to hear their stories? And like, what was it like for you and your troops as must have pissed you off, stiffened your resolve a bit. Why we're here?
Great. That's a great question, because up until that point, Sinai, there was no combat there. It was just observing, reporting, and it was real world, but it wasn't high stress, right? There was no threat. Not necessarily in Albania and then Kosovo, there wasn't, but seeing people coming up to our front gate or coming up to our soldiers holding dead infants that had starved to death. And they'd call me up. We had Motorola we'd also have our FM, but we'd use Motorola's, come running down, hey, sir. And having a vehicle checkpoint, people come walking up with dead children, or people would come up and their noses, that was one of the I can't tell you how many people I saw with their noses cut off. The Serbs would literally just take a knife and slice off their nose. So you're looking at a person, they'd have bandages over it, or they wouldn't have anything, and they'd heal. And like, I don't want to get graphic, but flies and things like that. And not just men and women, they mutilate children. That was very sobering very quickly for us and for my soldiers. To see that and to go through the camps when you'd tour them, or you'd see how these folks were not just living in literal rags. The only thing I could, in my mind, you see in World War II, the pictures of when they liberate a concentration camp, and of course they're emaciated and they're wearing rags. Of course, nothing can compare to that. That's just horror. But that's what I saw with children, and they literally walked, 100, 200 miles from Kosovo with only what they had, no shoes, rags, emaciated people, maybe a blanket around their shoulder, and we're giving them it's a torrential downpour and you get a shelter half. It was heartbreaking for sure to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people also, that was a NATO operation. Like,
right.
Did that experience, what you and your troops experience, how did that solidify in your mind, like how important NATO was, not just for deterring, the eastern flank, but also security in Europe? Because like, who would have thought like something like that could happen in Europe, right? Like,
yeah.
Did that did that like form like your views on NATO and working with NATO throughout the rest of your career?
I don't mean to laugh, but
Yeah.
asterisk,
Mhm.
because up until that point, and anybody who's worked with NATO or NATO forces, every nation, we joke, but everybody has a reputation. And
Sure.
as I mentioned, that the headquarters company was responsible. We're the Palace Guards, right? We're the Praetorian Guards. I had about 80 infantrymen, but then I had a bunch of support guys. And when we had done one exercise up to that point, we did an exercise in Italy of all places, just setting up the talks and doing jump talk for a 2-star headquarters while the troops are out in the field, maneuver. Well, to answer your question, taking too long, Brits have a very, I was working for a British 2-star, have a different view of things and how they see the way it should be. So do the Germans, so do the Dutch, so
Mhm.
do the Belgiques, so do the Norwegians. And you had to contend with every personality. And when
Mhm.
you're providing not just not just movement, but also feeding these guys, I felt very much at times like a waiter, kind of like a bellhop at a hotel. And American standards when you're in the field, and we're very direct and very gruff, and like, well, you get an MRE and you get water, and that's the way it's going to be. And we'll make sure that the heaters are on or whatever. But that's about I'm not going to go any extra effort. If I'm not painting a picture for you very well, it was
Mhm.
frustrating at times to work with our NATO counterparts because of their expectations.
Mhm.
And a lot of the guys would kind of bite their tongue and like, we got to work with these guys again. And, you kind of like Brits, they're so, geez, man, you just shake it. You see the Italians who had to have their wine every night or they're having their coffee and, just all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that deployment, when you're in real world and you're seeing the human suffering, okay, the bullshit stopped. Professional soldiers are professional soldiers and they were on task. There was very much a change happened very quickly. Not that they weren't professional to begin with, but it very much became a team effort. That
Mhm.
okay, national, what's on your shoulder sleeve, the whatever nationality, that's fine, but we've got a mission to do, and we get it. The
Yeah.
the most important thing is, whatever X, Y, and Z, and we're going to get it done. And I saw that very very quickly within the first 30 days that it
That's
was
great.
it was all business. So
Yeah.
it was a good, very good experience.
Was there a moment in your mission, or maybe not just a moment, but maybe a general feeling where your mission as a peacekeeper kind of clashed with your instincts? You're a paratrooper, man. You guys are trained to close with and destroy the enemy, right? But now you find yourself in this peacekeeping role. I mean, did you experience that clash on the ground?
There absolutely was. And so we secured again, the port city of Durrës in Albania initially before we moved forward. And then later in Kosovo, we fell in on some old buildings, right, that were built in the 50s by the Soviets. And we had to run power to them. And so what do the boys do? If we're going to start setting up razor wire, we're going to start in placing fighting positions with sandbags. And we were filling, so we made it, we're going to defend this because that's our job.
Yep.
And we're going to have interlocking fields of all the things you would imagine, right? We're going to have with my first sergeant and with the platoon sergeants, and all right, we're going to defend this area, and we're going to make it as impenetrable as we can. Again, thinking back 25 years and not knowing what we know now, with the best we could. Well, people still live in this city, and we're not in large scale combat. We're not even in a insurgency. So when people were trying to walk down the beach or just walk to get to their jobs, our guys are stopping them and shaking them down, and like, and I'm not just wasn't a war crime, but literally hands behind, like on the dude, have them spread out, and our guys are pointing at them like doing a EPW surge. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, there was that, or running a logistics resupply through the city and having to tell guys that, hey, pointing your 50 cal at people or your 240 or your M4 and stuff like that as you're rolling through. And we had soft skin vehicles. We didn't have up armors back then.
Mhm.
These folks aren't your enemy.
Yeah.
You're a guest in their country. They're not trying to, yeah, there's probably of course, there's organized crime all through Albania. It's notorious. They're not going to try and take you on. Lighten up with the, drawing down on folks. And it was, that was probably the first easily 60 days of, it's hard. How do you tell these guys to ease off, or, your posture
Yep.
on what they're doing. So yeah, there was no incidents. There was nothing, we didn't have anything. There was a couple times we detained people because they looked at them wrong, or they drove by and did the finger guns at our guys. Well, that wasn't smart,
Mhm.
and they had to kind of use interpreters to help smooth things over, and people would get very upset, or people didn't understand the language barriers, and they'd come driving through a checkpoint, that kind of stuff that came fairly close to getting shot up. But yeah, that was high adventure a couple times.
I mean, it's interesting, Mike, because like you mentioned earlier, like the Brits, like up to that point, they had just deep experience, like in Northern Ireland, like with the Troubles,
Yeah.
and so they probably brought a lot of like very like useful TTPs and experience to that. And then of course the United States, as part of NATO, goes into Kosovo and had already been in Bosnia up to that point.
Yep.
And then and then we have our own like experiences, right? And I guess to cap this part off is like, do you think that the Army did a good job, the U.S. Army did a good job of like codifying the lessons from their experience in the Balkans and carrying that forward into later operations? Because a lot of the stuff you're talking about seems very applicable to some of the things that you would later experience on the streets in Iraq.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we could probably spend a couple hours on this. I have a love hate with the Brits, and
Mhm,
mostly love.
mhm,
Being around their guys, they're just incredible warriors, great people, and I was exposed to the paras and just tough, surly, just good guys, right? Like,
mhm.
man, I want they know their business. They're
Yep.
really good folks, and they're no nonsense, and I really appreciate folks like that. Um, but we both, and I'm not picking on the British at all,
Mhm.
but we kind of look at each other with side eye, like,
Most Brits you
you know,
talk to have a love-hate relationship with us too. That's okay.
right? Yeah. So ultimate respect for them, but got along much better with like the Germans and things like that. But to your point, the British had far more experience in these
Mhm,
kinds of operations, especially in Northern Ireland, or how to interact with the local populace and things like that. Or when I look back, and you came in the Army, right after I did, everywhere you went, full battle rattle, pro mask on your hip, helmet. You were geared up to go to combat, right? You
mhm,
looked like you were, the stormtrooper from hell, and that's how we rolled everywhere, all the
mhm.
time, everything. And I'm not saying that that's neither good or bad. We're the professionals. We're the United States Army. This is how we. The Brits are wearing the berets and sleeves rolled up, and no drama, that kind of stuff. Just they understood the temperament of the environment far better than we did. And there's a lot of lessons that we could have learned from that. Later, I did, like a lot of guys. There was the rotations to Kosovo became kind of like so I did another rotation to Kosovo, and we were attached to a British, the Brits. And again, cultural differences aside, but they're very good at that kind of the peacekeeping operation
Yep.
aspect of things. They were masters at how to do. They taught us vehicle checkpoints, how to do aerial interdiction. They were teaching our guys. This was when I was in the 173rd. Later, we did a 6 month rotation there. Yeah, man, they were echelons beyond us in that kind of
Mhm.
stuff, in those TTPs,
Yeah.
which bore fruit later.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not. Again, I hope I'm scratching the itch on your question. I
Yeah.
think did we retain those lessons later? In some aspects, yes. But I'll tell you, not to get ahead of ourselves, because the 90s Army into the early 2000s, before the global war on terror started, in my opinion, we were too indoctrinated with the PKO, peacekeeping operation mindset. And when, um, large scale combat kicked off and then transitioned back to, a counterinsurgency or whatever you want to call it, it was very hard to gear up.
Yeah.
It was, it was very difficult to do that transition to, hey guys, this isn't Bosnia or Kosovo. This is a this is different. Thinking back 23 years ago, 22 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, the
So
rules of engagement alone. I mean, I remember the briefings that we got in the assembly area in Kuwait before we headed north to the berm. I mean, it was like if it's an Iraqi soldier, he can be killed. Period. And then like because that was a combatant. It was a declared combatant, right?
right,
And so Then 4 months later, you pivot again to a completely different rules of engagement now. And it's really difficult for warfighters to do that. We're not robots, man. We're human beings. We're Homo sapiens. And it's hard, especially with that underlying culture that the U.S. has, to make those pivots. They can be really messy, and there can be a lot of mistakes that are made.
And they were.
Yeah, 100%. It was we spent a lot of time on Kosovo, and I'm glad we did, because I think it parlays very nicely into the part that I think a lot of folks are really going to be interested to hear about. And that is, you played a central role moving now into Iraq, OAF 1. You played a central role in planning the airborne operation into northern Iraq that the 173rd conducted. And I think a lot of people are going to take a lot of interest in that. I know I will. So but first, let's talk about your role. You were the chief of plans for the brigade. Is that right?
Yeah. So I had just been promoted to major,
Mm-hmm.
and changed company command. So I had about a 7-month lag time before going to the Command and General Staff College, and they brought me back up to the brigade to exactly as you described. So I was working in the Brigade 3 shop for Major Mark Odom at the time as the Brigade 3. And it was when I had shown up in December of 02, everything was 100% focused Iraq. It was, we were all focused on Iraq.
So you were on that group, the small list of people that knew what the heck was going on. Like in December, you knew that you were heading to Iraq in early part of 2003.
It was whispered, to our surprise. I think everybody, after initially, 9/11, the very end of 2001 through to the half of 2002, we all thought, well, it's going to be Afghanistan. We don't know when, but everything became real, right? Across the DOD, everybody, it all became real. We're going, we don't know when. We got to start training for war right now. No one ever thought Iraq, but first started getting whispers. And I remember the brigade commander pulled us into the post theater. We were up in training in Grafenwehr in 2000, and he pulled us in. We were about to start a rotation for the JMTC, or the Joint Readiness Training Center, whatever the hell it is over there, the CMTC. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and
And he was like, "Yeah, Hohenfels, exactly." Colonel Bill Mayville was told, "You're going to go to Fort Hood, Texas, and you're going to do initial coordination with the 4th ID." And he had just pulled in like company commanders and above. So that's when he told us, we're thinking Iraq, and we're going to be attached to 4 ID. 4th ID, of course, at the time was at Hood. They were part of 3rd Corps. They were the most advanced infantry mechanized force that we had at the time. So, wow, okay, that's a change. So they go over, do initial coordination, and that starts gaining. I didn't hear anything else. We did a rotation, came back. I changed command, and then I walked up into brigade headquarters, and I got the dump. Yeah, absolutely. Iraq is, everything's coming together. It's coalescing. And at the time, again, it was still looking like 4th ID, and we were going to come through Turkey into northern Iraq. So we were going to be another maneuver brigade.
So the initial idea was that you guys were not going to do an airborne. It was going to be you guys were going to gack across the northern border from Turkey, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We were going to be another maneuver brigade for the 4th ID attached to them. So, of course, now the 4th ID is predominantly Stryker brigade combat team, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Back then, it was a heavy division. So it was a mech armor mix. And we were going to provide we had a lot more, 2 infantry battalions, 800 soldiers each. It was going to be quite a lot of ability to, maybe retain terrain or something like that for them while they continued on. So there was actual scheme of maneuver and how where they saw us, we were going to seize potentially. It doesn't matter if I say all this stuff now, but there was thoughts about up in Mosul, seizing the airhead in Mosul and expanding a lodgement there, not doing a jump, but and then operating out of Mosul and then expanding over, southward toward Kirkuk. They were going to do kind of a center brigade down there because they knew they had to get a handle on the oil fields, and that was their mission set. And we were going to assist there. So it was definitely like we were looking at each other. What are your capabilities? What can you do for us? What mobility packages do you have to keep up with our tanks and our Brads? So there was a lot of crosstalk up until about January.
Wow. And so So what was the impetus behind the change? It was political, right? Like the
Yeah,
Turks said no to an assault from the north. Is that the driving
exactly.
force?
You got it. The Turkey the negotiations fell through.
Mhm.
So I guess for several months they were working with Turkey to use their port facilities, move across the greater part of Turkey, and attack north down into Iraq. And they're like, no, you're not going to attack another Arabic country. No, it's not happening. You're not attacking another Muslim country through our territory. You can use overflight, but no, you're not going to use our ports. You're not going to use our land. So everything fell through. Now the Fourth ID they had like 40 ships out in the Med with all of their equipment, all of their tanks, all of their Brads on 40 vessels. I tell you, for months, that stuff, all of their equipment. So they weren't allowed to train. They weren't being maintained. They were just sitting on ships awaiting the go, right? Because you know how it is, right? With a heavy division, RSOI through a port, and then they'd have to line haul them to, staging areas and all that. You can imagine. Well, that got, no. And then the CENTCOM commander at the time, it's like, just keep them in the Med, right? We're just going to keep them there, not divert them to go south into Kuwait. That was a conscious decision. Is kind of they thought that was going to help fix those 12 Iraqi divisions up in the north to keep them guessing. So then UCOM talks to CENTCOM, and they said, okay, in January, start planning for an airborne insertion. You're going to be chopped to SIFSOC, and then you're going to be OPCON to SIFSOC, and then TACON to just sort of north. So our brigade commander, colonel, is going to work for the colonel just sort of north commander and sort it out. But you guys you're going to do an airborne, find a target. I know you think, really, is God is my judge. I can't tell you how many times with our ALO, with the other planners in the 3 shop, sitting there until midnight, looking at, they used to call it the giant report, different airfields. We're looking at Mosul to jump on Mosul. We were looking at Kirkuk, or we were looking at, finally found Bashur. Anyway, I'm getting way ahead of myself. I apologize, but
No, this is great.
it was okay. Just Sodef North, it's 10th group guys, contacting them, doing initial coordination. And it wasn't until I remember this distinctly, February 2003, February 17th. They flew up to Italy, their planners, their commander, their battalion commanders, and we met in Vicenza, and like a skull session for 2 full days, maybe 3. Big maps, pointing, what can you do? Capabilities brief. What can you guys do? What do you do? This is how we see the fight. This is what we'd like you to do. Can you do this for us? Well, this is how it works. When we do, this is our doctrine. This is how, and it was a lot of, oh, okay. All right. Break. At the end of that session, we both agreed, all right, above the green zone, there's an airfield in Bashur. It's about a 6,700-foot airfield. It's just a hammerhead. There's no buildings. There's no hangars. There's no power. There's no nothing. It was built 50, 60 years ago. How about that? Jump, seize that, establish a lodgment, build combat power, and then you can help us, the just sort of North guys, you can help us with your maneuver forces, and you guys have a field artillery battery. Yeah, that's great. Sure, yeah, it sounds good. That's 40 days out from when the jump actually happened. Not even, because the jump happened March 26th. That was February 17, 19. It was just, go
Mike,
ahead, I'm sorry.
I know, Mike, this is great. And I want to kind of repackage things, because I think there's a very interesting bit of learning here. So you said December, you guys got in touch with 4th ID.
Yep.
And you start planning, right? Now
Continue planning.
You're planning for plan A. A lot of work.
Yep. Yes.
January hits, and now you have a change of mission, and now you're working with a completely different command on a completely different mission. You couldn't get more different than an airborne operation or a ground assault, right? All the while you have, and that's over the course of about 30, maybe 40 days. And you're having to make this big pivot. And now you're getting this new mission, and you've got 40 days until you actually hit the drop zone. Paratroopers are hitting the drop zone in Bashir. I think for people have to understand like how crazy it must have been for you. Like some farewell Christmas. There was no Christmas that year. I mean, that's insane, man. And these aren't like small branch plans. These are fundamentally different plans with completely different underlying assumptions. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that people understood that they were able to wrap their heads around that, and the gravity and that's a big lift, man.
It is a big lift. And to add to the layer of complexity, I want you to understand, okay, February, they come and we do a joint planning session. There was still a possibility we were going to go with 4th ID. I found my old notebooks and I was going through it and was like, oh my gosh, the back and forth, and we were joking about it, like gallows humor. And please forgive me, you can maybe cut this out. So the Space Shuttle Columbia had just crashed. And we're like, well, thank God, because we know that option's out. We're not going to insert by Columbia Space Shuttle because we were still thinking that the fourth, they were telling us that any day Turkey's going to open. To that point, all of our vehicles, all of our, again, Humvees, LMTVs, AT trucks, right? The old, turtlebacks, all of that stuff went to Dalmalin. They were being put on ships. They were going to be loaded up on ships, link up with those ships with a 4th ID and go to Turkey. So all of that stuff for the 1/3, most of our mobility package was down at a port about 4 hours away. Still, so continue planning with SIPSOC and the Joseph North guys, but don't forget 4th ID because we think that's probably going to happen. Right. March 3rd, brigade commander, brigade staff, we jump on planes, we fly to Qatar.
It's 20 days before the invasion starts.
Roger. Hey, we really need to flesh out some details with the brigade staff. So 4 or 5 days, third, again, links up with not only the Joseph North plans team, but the SIPSOC guys, because Joseph North hadn't infilled yet. They were still their battalion commanders and their battalions, in their commander, and they're much more granular planning on what they would like us to do and what we could do and sorting out the timeline and really getting with the Air Force too. What's the package like? Because there was a competition for 17s to go back in the way back machine. Rangers were thinking they were going to jump on BIAP.
Yeah.
If you recall that, they thought that was a viable option. That, all right, well, Ranger Regiment's going to jump on BIAP, to kick whatever launch those guys out. So there's only so many C-17s. The Air Force kind of was, you need how many you need 15 C-17s, and they had to have, I don't know how many it was for the Ranger mission, but that got scrapped. But those guys were planning that. Long story short, okay, handshake. We do briefings. Everybody kind of donkey nods. The SIFSOC commander, got it. Sounds like a plan, or we have an understanding. We'll flesh this out. It had to be a brief to the SIFSOC commander. The UCOM commander had to give it a go. He had to say, okay, I agree to this. Like everybody had to have a conditions check. Like, I want a brief for that. What's going on here? So there had to be a donkey nod across the board. I was left behind as the LNO. I had an LNO team. So I stayed in Qatar to work with, kind of obviously liaison for the brigade while we're continue to flesh this out, because they go back to, okay, we've got 2 weeks to get this together and, get this brigade. Oh, by the way, it had never jumped out of C-17s before. We'd only jumped C-130s because theater lift. That's all we'd gotten. So we had a brigade full of paratroopers that had never even been inside a C-17. And the first time those 18 to 24-year-olds are going to fall out of it is into, a combat mission.
Amazing.
Right.
Yeah. So, Mike, this is fascinating. And so I guess the one of the questions as a planner then, I guess, what's the hardest problem to solve in planning a brigade level airborne operation in combat? Like what's the biggest problem that a planner has to deal with among the 1,000 problems?
It's 23 years past, and of course we did these exercises at 18th Airborne Corps to an extent, planning this stuff. But the that's such a good question, and I think it comes back to, you always start with the end in mind. What's the ground tactical plan, right? So what is the lodgement wherever you're going to, and that doesn't necessarily have to be an airfield, but you're going to secure. So what does the ground tactical plan look like? Start with that, right? Start deconflicting the end state there. When you expand a lodgement and then work your way backward, what does that look like? What does the ground look like? How are you going to deconflict fires? How are you going to do command and control? How are you going to provide logistics? The big ones, fires. How do you do all that stuff? And who's got control and when? Start with that. The airborne part, the drop, yes, that's very difficult and all the sequencing, but start with that. How am I going to control? Who has control and when? When do I control fires? How am I going to resupply? How am I going to do the casualty evacuation, that kind of stuff? All the sequencing of that, sorting it out.
Mhm.
And then you have to overlay time to it because as you well know, it's like throwing a box of jacks down. Paratroopers everywhere. How long does it take them to assemble, to get to their march objectives, and to seize those objectives? All the sequencing and all that stuff. I'm not explaining it very well, but I think, yeah, Fire C2,
Mhm.
Kazovac, and yeah, those are the ones that are huge.
A little bit more of a dramatic question, Mike, because you're doing a great job, by the way, man. What was the nightmare scenario that you guys were wrestling with, and how did you guys mitigate it?
Yeah, it's so this jump, uh, it's 40 kilometers above the green line. So the nearest Iraqi divisions were 20-ish miles away. We weren't worried about that. The infill portion, of course, you always have to plan for worst case scenario. God forbid you lose an aircraft on infill. Those kind of contingencies. What's
Mhm.
min-force planning? If you lose a C-17, if a bird breaks, what does that look like? How long does that take? What if the airfield gets shut down? I remember distinctly those kind of contingencies. What if the airfield gets rocketed and it's unusable? Well, what's the point of doing the jump then? Why are we going to, because we can't bang down C-17s. The whole point was to get, and we don't want to get into this later because people always ask, well, why don't you just air land them there? And we did over the course of the next several days. You can do it in 10 minutes, one pass, put 1,000 guys on the ground and heavy drops, right? With javelins and a small mobility package in 10 minutes and have those C-17s clear the airspace. Or to air land that same package on that particular airfield would have taken 5 nights. Bringing down C-17s, the mobility on the ground was like one aircraft at a time, bangs down. It had just enough maneuver mobility on the ground to do a turn, drop ramp, offload dudes, and then take off again. Then you bang down another C-17. Combat controller, or excuse me, the STT guys on the ground, the Air Force, they know their business. Like I can have 2 birds on the ground at a time. And I can't be landing, bringing them in and out. So it's a slow process, right?
Yeah.
And
And
I
I think
kind
a
of got
lot
off
of
track
people,
there.
no, it's great. A lot of people, man, they're so misinformed when they talk about this operation, right? Guys who weren't
Yeah,
part of it, because there's always this stuff about this trash talk about like, oh, what's a combat jump and what's not a combat jump.
yeah,
Here's the
yeah.
bottom line: how far away were the Iraqi divisions again?
The nearest, it was about 20. You draw a straight line, 22 miles, 20 miles, something like that.
Yeah. So the drop zone was an indirect fire range for longer
Right.
range munitions. It was absolutely a combat zone. And also
Yeah.
you had an Al Qaeda network that was active in that area. I know the Sajodif was very focused on that, of course. I
Sure.
mean, like it was a combat jump. So, I get all pissed off when people talk about that. Because I think a lot of people, when they think about combat jumps, they think about like, Normandy, January 6th, 1944, like that's the standard for a combat jump. It's not.
Yeah.
I mean, that's obviously at the high level, right? But like it was absolutely an opposed environment. If the Iraqis at that time even had long range fires, I don't know if they did or not. But the bottom line is that they could range that airfield, and leaving a C-17 on that airfield for an extended period of time is a nice target for someone who might be able to spot a round or two.
Yeah. I mean, you've done your homework and you looked into it. And I agree. I used to kind of set my teeth on edge. Like, oh, were you there? There are, off the top of my head, 3 combat jumps in World War II done in the Pacific Theater, unopposed. No Japanese forces, conducted by the 503rd, that allowed them to assemble and then go hit their march objectives. That was the point. You
Right.
see Band of Brothers and well, if it's not dodging anti-aircraft fire like Band of Brothers and it's not a combat jump, well, no, it is a combat jump. Number one, it is, because it is enemy controlled territory. And just like you said, yes, they did have long range fires. They had the capability if they wanted to. There was Ansar al-Islam that, God forbid, if they wanted to get wind of it, or if OPSEC was compromised, who knows what would have happened. Number 3, absolutely. The Air Force wasn't going to bang down their $100 million C-17 in broad daylight at Bashir Airfield in northern Iraq.
No
They
way.
did it at night. I was there. And I'll tell you this, when I air landed on a MC-130 the day before, it was snowing. There was ice on the ground. Guys from the 24th STS were like, man, you try and land a C-17 on this airfield, he'll go skidding off the end of the runway full of 100 guys. because the extra weight in that C-17, and I know people are listening, it's like, oh, really? This isn't your normal airfield. This is a
No.
short little shit stick airfield up in the middle of nowhere that they're going to run out of runway to hit the brakes. Now you try and bang down with full of a tank or a Brad or, fueler blivets. There's not enough runway,
Yeah.
number one. And it would take, I think it was 5 or 6 a night they could only bring down. So it was going to take 3 or 4 nights to infill the brigade if we wanted to airland them. Because again, 10 minutes. Yes, absolutely, guys. It was a show of force. That was part of the mission statement. As a show of force, it was a demonstration to do an airborne assault. So not only the Iraqis, but for the Iranians, but from the Turks, and for the PUK and PDK, the Kurds on the ground, to say, hey, the Americans are here. We've just conducted an airborne assault, right? We've got Americans in the north in the crap.
Yeah.
That was absolutely a demonstration, and it
100%.
sent a message.
Yeah, 100%. And the whole point of a plan and the whole point of a higher level staff and of commanders is to set conditions, right, where something like the traditional opposed jump doesn't happen. That's mission
Right.
success, right? Like,
Yeah.
what people always say is like, what constitutes a combat jump? Well, in this day and age, that actually is mission failure, because you've now put your troops at a high level of risk, and you've increased the probability you will not accomplish your commander's intent of opening up a dilemma on the northern side of Iraq. It was a total mission success, in my view. I'm emotional about this topic because I just don't like all the trash talk. So this leads us into a really interesting point. I go back to my time with you in Fort Bragg, and you had this cool picture in your office. I'll never forget it. I carried it with me everywhere because I spent so much time on staff. And it was a picture of a soldier, and it read, everything you plan or write must be executed by this man. He and his buddies will pay for your mistakes. And this airborne operations are inherently risky. Like on a daytime Hollywood jump in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Holland drop zone, they're risky. So that, for you personally, what you were doing, that there's a lot of weight, man. Because I know you, I know the standards you have for yourself. Like, that was a lot of weight for you at this time when you're playing the central role and playing this operation.
That's I preach. That's funny. You remember that. Anyway, I still have that in my kit bag, that poster. I think when I look back, I had just changed out company command. I pinned on major and I handed over, and I was very forlorn because, of course, I wanted to take the boys. I wanted to go with them. We had, for backstory, we had just stood up that battalion a year prior, and I was one of the first 10 guys assigned to that newly activated battalion, and we had grown and fleshed out over the course of a very intensive training. And we had bonded very tightly, not just within the company, but the sister companies, the battalion staff. It was a very, very tight unit. When you form something, when you establish standards and all the things you can think about, it was an amazing experience. So handing the guy on over, and he was a great guy. I couldn't have asked for a better dude to hand over the company to, but I knew that the likelihood of they're going to go. They're going to go. Those are my guys. I love them. I love them. I get choked up still. I still talk to them and, text and whatever. We're still in a. So absolutely, to your point, now I'm on brigade staff and I'm one of them. Instead, normally, right, you're at a brigade or you're a division brigade, and then you go down, or a battalion, and then you go down. I went back up. I had just left there. I think that helped me keep me grounded, that I know who's going to be falling out of that plane in a couple of days or, a matter of weeks. I know those guys. I understand what's going to be asked of them when they seize blocking positions or the follow-on missions or what they can and can't do, because I just, I was just there. I just trained them. I know what they're capable of. So that was a seminal experience in my career at the 10th, 11th, 12th year mark, and it stayed with me. So for sure, that whole operation, even though I was a small facet, I wasn't, a planner than an LNO, and kind of ran around and got the bird's eye view on the inner workings between the two organizations and how it went and didn't go. It was interesting for sure. And it kind of,
And for you, and this is the coolest part of this, because normally if you're a plans officer, like, you're back at the headquarters getting ready for the next thing, right? but you were on the ground. So you were seeing the execution of your plan from the ground. You were actually watching the boys jump in.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. Number one, like, how did you actually get to theater? Because you were talking to me about this in your prep call. You had a pretty, like, it was pretty sporty for you to get there, right? To actually get into on the ground.
Yes. So, yeah, I'm nobody, when you hear the word, oh, you're the LNO, I was kind of like, but I get it. At least I'm in Qatar and I'm an extra major. So I just, what else are they going to do with me? So all right, I'm in Qatar I had no idea I was going to go in, infill. And I had a master sergeant and a lieutenant, the brigade engineer, who was with me. And he's like, okay, you're the LNO package. And the master sergeant was a sharp guy. He'd already had his first sergeant time. He was kind of like waiting to go to the academy. Good dude. So the SIFSOC commander, I was briefing him on a daily basis, and the J3. And I'll say this, there was tension between the two organizations, between the 173rd and just sort of north. Again, you've got one colonel take on to another colonel. Now it's like, what? That happens all the time. You be professional, you sort it out. That's fine. And a semi-permissive, counterinsurgency established environment. We're conducting an invasion. You're a conventional airborne brigade combat team, and you want me to do what for this? And same thing. We kind of looked at each other, I don't know about that kind of very mutually exclusive. We're going to jump and establish a lodgment, expand the airhead, bang down air lands. We're going to bring in the immediate reaction task force from USARA, which is tanks and Bradleys. And then once we've massed combat power, conduct an attack on Kirkuk.
Yep.
That's what we're doing. If anything that you guys are doing supports it, meaning you, just sort of north, that's great. And just sort of north was, to their point, you work for us. So you've got combat power. Can you assist with, you've got rifle companies and mortar platoons, and you've got firing, 105 batteries. How about after you've assembled and you've achieved 100% status, maybe we can go kill some enemy. Like I said, there was dynamic tension. So long story short, the SIFSOC commander told his deputy CG, you're going in as a 1-star, you're taking a small team, and you're going to make sure these guys play well together. And I'm paraphrasing.
Sure.
But that was, at the time, Brigadier General Parker, who was an SF guy, he was the SIFSOC deputy, said, all right, Hastings, you're coming with me. You're coming with my aide or my XO, and we're taking a small plans team. We're going to infill, and we're going to be on the ground, and we're going to make sure that these two organizations are synchronized and working together. And I'm good, him being the 1-star, they're going to listen to me because they're not working well together right now. And this is before the operation even happened. So had about, I think, a day notice, go pack your shit. We're getting on at 1:30 tomorrow morning. I remember it was Odark. I didn't have a weapon with me because I thought I was staying in Qatar. Like, I didn't bring, an M4 or anything from 173rd. I called back to Italy and I'm like, hey, you guys okay with this? Why not? Go. Green light. So drew a weapon from those guys, ammunition. I'm loading magazines like, oh shit, man, I'm going to war. This is a team roll. And so this is like the 21st of March. I get notified. 22nd, we take off. We flew from Qatar to Saudi Arabia to Jeddah, out in the middle of nowhere. Landed to refuel. We weren't allowed to get off the plane because the Saudis I could not touch their soil. So we had to sit on the ramp while they refueled the aircraft. Then flew to Jordan and sat in Jordan for 12 hours because it was a SIFSOC. It was an MC-130, and there's CIA guy. I'm the hand of God, man. CIA guy's like, hey, we're going to bring in these mortar systems, Russian mortars, 120s, and a whole bunch of 120 millimeter mortar ammo on the back of this MC-130. And these two paramilitary, I guess, ground branch guys, because they were just, like, hey, what's up, dude? Wearing Arc'teryx and beards and, Oakleys and stuff. And I'm with the General Parker had his small, there was like 6 of us. To a conventional guy, I'm like, who are these guys? We're loading, hey, help them out. I'm like loading mortar ammo in a Russian, 120 mortar, on the back of this thing. Like, okay, I got, it's going to go to the Kurds up in northern Iraq. And whatever, we take off from Jordan, we go to Constanta, Romania. And that's, where they were kind of staging out of. And long story short, 5-6 hours on the ground there, infilled the night of 22 March, and then 25 March, and then 26 March, the jump happened. So MC-130, low-level flight over Turkey into northern Iraq. The vomit comet, like, oh, God. I'll say this, man, being in the back of an MC-130 as opposed to you've flown on it 130s 100 times, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's typical, your seats and you're buckled in. And an MC, there's just a bunch. It's just shit lashed down everywhere. The seats aren't down. The SF guys have like their safety lines snap linked into the side. Like, I'm looking at the dudes. I was with another major. He's an SF guy. He turned out to be a really cool guy. We hung out the entire time of run. I'm like, hey, bro, we're not going to lower the seats of this thing? He's like, fucking Sherry. He's like, no, man. And I had never been in an MC before. They have like a bubble on the side, like there was a navigator, and it is a different type of aircraft. So I had to make a makeshift safety. Anyway, they're doing such low level. I'm like rising off the ground with all this equipment. I'm starting to get green, like, shit, man. I'm getting sick as hell.
Because you had to be worried about the air defense threat. Like, you guys are going into a
Absolutely.
hot combat zone.
Yeah. And there were dudes like, I took fire. I mean, they were, whatever, golden fucking idiots, just taking shots and stuff like that. But an MC-130 and a normal 130 doing a low level, those cats are a different breed, man. I mean, hand to God, looking out this little bubble window. If we were 50 feet above the ground, I don't even know if we were that high on some plate. I was like, oh my God, man, I'm gonna splatter into a mountain.
Amazing.
So anyway, we flew in, and the 173rd actually had a LURS team that went in with us to help set up the drop zone. The Brigade S1 went in as well. So there was an SF team because Task Force Viking was also infilling. So over the previous 3 nights, I think they started their infill on the 21st or 22nd, only 1 or 2 nights before the 22nd, like 4 nights before the jump. So they were still building combat power, right? I mean, if you can imagine, they're bringing in their ODAs and, their stuff and all their kit and equipment, and kind of getting set up, and they're rolling right into combat operations because, like, the day or two after the jump, they had that big fight with Viking Hammer.
That's right.
Which was, awesome. They cleaned house with those guys. They did a great job.
Did. Yep. So you were on the drop zone D-1. That means the day before the airborne operation. And during our prep call, you told a kind of funny story about like what was your last communication to the brigade? Like you were, I mean, this is history, man. Like what was the final report back?
So John Mark, so the night before, right, we landed at Bashur Airfield, and then they had like British trucks just, jump and throw your shit in the back. It was like 3:00 in the morning. And then we go off to Erbil. Racked out for 3, 4, 5 hours or something, woke up, and I'm like, hey, can I go take a look at the drop zone for the mission? It was Objective Buford. That was the name of the objective. And I've got an Iridium sat phone. And so I'm riding in this, Peugeot or whatever the hell it was with the 24th STS Air Force Special Operations guys who are, I don't know what they're, Kevin and John and Tim, and you're like, hey, man. And they're all like, chilling and stuff like that. And cool, like not a uniform item in sight except, weapons. And like, sure, dude, we're going to go take a look at the drop zone. If you like, I swear to God, if he'd like Spicoli, because they had to do, they drill. So they drill into the concrete and they can tell how many, air landings of certain type of aircraft. I'm like, yes, I want to go. I want to take a look at this. So we get there and it's broad daylight. And, I'm thinking, I'm the only one in a uniform, and they're hands in pockets, like, calm down, guy. It's fine. We're going to do our measurements. You go do whatever. There's snow on the ground. And it was just thick, gooey mud all around the air, like around off the tarmac. And I'm stepping through, and I've got, desert boots on, and shit, just frozen mud, worst case scenario, right? Like not hard packed earth at all. And I know the guys were jumping in combat light. They had no snivel gear. They had 2 JS list suits, 2 protective suits, because, if you remember, we all thought that chemical attack was imminent, that they were going to release, they were going to do something with, we assumed. So ammo, JS list suits, water, whatever else, batteries, all the things, no snivel. And I'm like, it is freaking 31 degrees, frozen. They're all at Aviano Air Force Base. And I'm trying to, I'm like walking around in circles trying to trying to talk to these guys. Like, oh, please, oh, please. Finally, I get a hold of the Brigade 3 and, they patching me through, and I talk to the Brigade XO, then Major Randy George. I'm like, yes, sir, I am on Objective Buford right now. I am standing here, and there's snow on the ground. There's snow, and it's icy, and it's muddy. You really, I don't know if it's too late, but the boys are going to need, cold weather gear for sure. And the conditions are bad. It's bad. Like freezing rain started later that day too, because
Wow.
it was just bad business. So they're like, who is this? Because I called the only number head at Aviano Air Force Base. I'm talking like, yes, my name is Major Michael Hastings. Could you please patch me through to someone from the winter, like an Air Force guy? Hang on, like.
It reminds me of that scene in Heartbreak Ridge when they call back like to the switchboard, right, to call in the airstrikes.
Yeah. It was this is, literally, like they're going to load on aircraft, in 10 hours or something like that,
Amazing.
to do the flight. It was a 4-hour flight. And, what can they do? Really nothing.
Yeah.
I don't even think they could, change much, but I was like, they got to know the conditions here. It's terrible. It was, and it took them like 15 hours before they were 100% after the jump.
What were you feeling? What were your emotions when you saw the first pass?
Yeah, man, I was under nods. I'll never forget this. I felt in the pit of my stomach, like if anybody had seen me, they would have seen tears in my eyes. And for days, even now, and I remember days after watching the videos of it and stuff like that, but watching it live under PVS 14, I was just watching it. And I was about to, you train your whole life, right? You train, not your whole life. That's overstatement. When you're in an airborne unit, I'm going to jump in combat. I'm going to lead men. And 3 months prior, I handed over that rifle company to that guy jumping out right now. And I'm watching him. I was crying, man.
Yeah.
I had tears in my eyes on the drop zone, and pitch black. It was cloud cover. It was black, pitch black, like no ambient. It was really, 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 really dark. So thank God, because I wasn't like boo-hoo, but I was just like, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Totally understandable, awesome. Man.
Yeah.
And so now the jump is completed. Was there like a feeling like, oh crap, like now we have the rest of everything we have to do? Because like everything I suspect up to that point was about setting conditions for the jump. Like now we've got like a mission ahead of us. Was there like this feeling? It's like it's time to get hot,
It was, thinking back, and there's so much we could discuss. I remember, of course, watching the jump, and we stayed there for several hours in the drop zone while they assembled and linked up with the brigade leadership, the 3 and the commander, and kind of let them sort things out because they're getting reports and things like that. But we just wanted to kind of, hey, boss, I'm here, squeeze his arm. Hey, sir, a big hug, quick bro hug, and friends and stuff like that. And just as they're doing their stuff. But I remember linking up with the Brigade 3-4 hours after the jump, and he had a small sick-up set up. Mm-hmm. He was covered up to his chest in mud.
Yeah.
And it was, again, then Major Mark Odom, and he was sitting on the frozen ground, frozen concrete with the sick-up over him, and his RTO was slumped over, smoked, because the airborne timeline is exhausting. So those guys had been up for probably over 24 hours. Mm-hmm. They were up at Aviano Air Force Base for the night prior. Nobody really slept, doing rehearsals, drops of full force rehearsals, ComXs, all the things, loading up, loose rig, all that kind of, they rigged before they, jumped. Then they jump in, assemble, slogging through mud. The RTO was knocked out. He was wiped out. Major Odom, he retired General Odom, covered in mud, and he was just exhausted, like beat. I'm like, hey, it was hard because I was a major too, but he'd always been sir to me. I was like, hey, sir, what can I do for you? He's like, you want a radio watch? You want to hold this for a minute?
I can get a couple hours.
I'm like, Roger that. I'll help you out. But it was exactly that. It took 15 hours to assemble. And then it was, can we get to our march objectives? Can we get to our, blocking positions? Because in 12 hours, we're going to start banging down C-17s, and we got to have this airhead open. Yeah. We got to have everything checked off to start the sequence of, of the next several nights of bringing in C-17s. And Yeah, it was it was until the next afternoon before we had 100% accountability. But then it was all about tracking. It was all about tracking what came off every single aircraft, down to how many pallets of water, how much fuel, how many javelins, how many vehicles, what bumper number. It was an air bridge from Italy into northern Iraq that wasn't sustainable. So just sort of north and 173rd, every day they were using like 10,000 gallons of fuel, just trucks and Humvees and all that. We had to get it through. So we finally, after I think it was late March, like 5, 6 days later, Turkey finally allowed contractors to come in with fuel trucks in through northern Iraq because we brought in again the heavy immediate response task force from Europe with 5 Brads and 5 tanks and 15 1s, and they, you know the deal, man. They just
Yeah.
guzzle fuel.
Oh yeah.
So setting up a fuel farm and all the things, it was just building combat power for the eventual push into what we knew was going to be Kirkuk. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Mike, I guess here's the thing. We spent a lot of time talking about the airborne operation. There's a whole nother operation, but we're calling audible here because I think that people at home I really want people to understand this was just an enormous amount of work. How hard it is to set the theater, to do a joint forcible entry, to build combat power, to move to, your subsequent objectives requires enormous amount of work. And I always tell people, staff officers and staff NCOs do not get a lot of opportunities to become heroes in the traditional sense. But every single day, the really good ones, they are heroes because, the incredible amount of skill and discipline and just raw effort to be able to bring all this stuff together so that the paratroopers are able to do their jobs and are able to live to fight another day. I mean, it's just fantastic work, Mike, to you and your team. Yeah, I mean, at the time I was south of Baghdad moving up, and like it made a difference. Like there's no doubt in my mind that if those divisions that were in the north had been sent down, okay, there would be no Thunder Run. That's just my guess,
Yeah.
right? There would be no collapse of the regime as fast as it happened. Of course, all the rest of the stuff is, for historians to litigate, but like in my mind, those divisions were fixed by the presence of a sizable U.S. force in the north, and you probably saved a lot of lives. No doubt about it in my mind. So if there's anything you should feel very proud about, not just what you guys accomplished, but the impact you had on the fight, you should be all the 173rd should be very proud of that.
Yeah, it was. I appreciate that very much. Absolutely. And, I was a part of that much of it, really. I mean, a very small portion of it. And I'm so grateful to be part of that history of at least of that brigade to be a witness to it.
Yeah.
But to your point, yeah, man, that I don't think that it's funny when you thought about this a lot, how different the attack north with Fifth Corps with Seaflick, Third ID and the MEF,
Uh-huh.
Just parallel attacking in zone and just the carnage that they faced. It was amazing that we were thinking about this later. That I'll be honest, man, if any of those divisions, any one of those 12 divisions decided to attack, we'd have been in trouble.
Yeah.
We would
They're
have been in trouble.
armored divisions against the light
We
infantry brigade.
Yeah, yeah, and it just sort of nothing disparaging
Mm-hmm.
against the Joint Special Operations guys and the 60,000 Kurds,
Yeah.
but not 60,000 is still 60,000, and of course coalition air assets that would have done an enormous amount of damage to the enemy. But if if they had decided no, we're coming, we would have been in trouble. And I think that the larger lesson learned too is later. Uh, you can plan and prepare and execute these, an airborne operation, but it's very much a house of cards. You have
Yeah.
to have the conditions perfectly met for everything to fall in line, right? And I don't know. I thought about later that if they had tried to do an airfield seizure or seize BIAP, they would have had I don't know how many C-17s lost, right? That would have been shot down. It would have been a bloodbath. Yeah, I mean, if you saw it, I mean, you were there. You saw the carnage that I saw BIAP mid-April, and it
Yeah.
looked like, oh my God, man,
Yeah. It was.
burning aircraft, hulks everywhere. It was on fire. It just looked like carnage, like wreckage.
Why
I
do you
guess
think? Do you have any theories? I'm sorry, Mike. I didn't mean to cut you off. Do you have any theories on why those Iraqi divisions didn't attack?
we can only ponder a guess that I'm sure I would guess that their communications were severed,
Yeah.
that they didn't have, and they're not autonomous like we are, right? That they don't have, in the absence of orders, attack. I don't have any doubt that any NATO formation, let alone an American division, my last orders were whatever it might be. My
Hmm.
doctrinal task is I will attack, I will defend, whatever, and execute, execute. I don't think they had that. I
Yeah.
think that they were waiting to be told. And then when Baghdad fell on 9/10 April, it was a cloak. They disappeared. They knew it was over. They knew that. Well, very quickly word of mouth spread that Baghdad is gone,
Yeah.
and those guys just like that, they're out of here.
When you guys assaulted into Kirkuk, did you see like abandoned tanks and abandoned positions?
It, everywhere,
Yeah.
everywhere. I remember driving in. I was in a non-tactical vehicle and just seeing uniforms. Like literally, they had stripped off their uniforms and just dropped them. Now there was still violence there. The Kurds were taking revenge, man. They had Iraqi army, Iraqi police had melted, and you want to talk about extrajudicial killings? They were going to get theirs. They were going to get
Yeah.
their pound of flesh. So it was a very violent time. But the
Mhm.
IPIA, the standing Iraqi army, they gone, man. I
Yeah.
remember going to Kirkuk airfield, and if you wanted souvenirs, they were everywhere. Uniform items, rig, chest weapons, just thrown around, trucks abandoned. I thought, is this, guys, is this the rapture? Just
Amazing.
everywhere.
Yeah.
They had melted. They didn't want anything to do to be, caught wearing an Iraqi army uniform because they knew
Yeah.
we were coming.
So, Mike, that's a great summary. It's one of the best I've heard, and I've read quite a bit about this AERs. I've watched a good bit of people that were involved, but this is one of the best, most descriptive uh, views of like what happened behind the scenes. So I'm grateful for that. I do want to pivot to later in your career. You came back to Iraq during the surge, or
Yep.
sometime around the surge, with a different unit, part of a striker brigade. And I
Yep.
want to talk to you a little bit about, not so much to get into the details of what you did. I want to talk to you a little bit. How different was it to be in Diyala, Tarimiyah, the
Mm.
Baghdad belts, the northern Baghdad belts, during the surge? How did that experience, like, how do you, a lot of folks at home, they don't know anything about this. It was a
Yeah.
very different type of mission. It was a very different experience for you, your unit during that time.
Yeah, of course. It was there was very little that was the same when I had left there after OIF-1 and coming back for the surge. Way more volatile situation, way more violent. You weren't cruising around not conventional forces in non-tactical vehicles. You weren't you it was we knew what we were getting into. Well, we
Yeah.
didn't know. That's wrong. We knew it was going to be very violent. We knew it was going to be a very contested area of operation. We didn't even find out to that point exactly where we were going until we were in Kuwait. So we surged early, like a lot of units, probably very similar. We were still down in Kuwait for 2 weeks, kind of doing the RSOI. Had no idea what AO. We assumed Baghdad, maybe as a reinforcement. We were told maybe Mosul, and then finally it was Taji, the Taji area, and then just north of there into that area. So you very quickly start to do an assessment, and the battalion commander and I flew up and did a link up with the unit we were doing a RIPTOA with. And I remember it was mid-May that we were supposed to have the RIPTOA complete, but they gave us the RIPTOA brief from 1 April to 28 April 2007, just on the 20 kilometers of Route Tampa that we had.
Mm,
There were 282 total attacks
yeah.
in 28 days. 282. That's small arms, IED, IDF in a 28-day period. So you knew, and again, Tampa is the artery from Baghdad all the way up to Mosul. It's Highway 1. You have to travel it. Everybody travels on it every day. So we knew it was a very tough task because we had to secure a good chunk of it and then the surrounding area. So
Yeah.
I remember for sure, long 20-hour days. And that's not an exaggeration.
No.
Curled up in the TOC tent and just bagging out there, trying to figure things out and became the battalion XO. And yeah, there was nothing. It was nothing similar to OIF-1. It was
Yeah.
nothing. It was very different.
I I think a lot of people, and this is just my individual opinion, that was a time where I genuinely felt for what I thought I would never feel in my entire life, that we were going to lose. Like that it was so bad, right? Like I remember thinking, I just don't know how much longer the American people are going to put up with the casualties. It was a really rough time. And you were part of a pretty bold strategy, which is to surge a whole bunch of combat power in and around Baghdad, right?
Yeah.
And really they assumed a lot of risk in other parts of the country, right? To really put that combat power there. And there was a lot of really important foundational work that would later translate to success in subsequent rotations, like with the Sons of Iraq,
Mhm.
reconciliation. But I think just having combat power out there to keep the enemy on his heels, and then also our special operations teammates, just this relentless like tempo of targeting those networks, right?
Yes.
On top of that. But I remember those are dark days, man. And we've had some other guests on here, 3 that were part of a striker brigade that went into Iraq. And I
Okay.
always love talking to them and the guys in striker brigades, like what capabilities about like the strikers were really ideally suited like for that particular mission set. Like if you guys weren't in strikers, you would have been in Bradleys, right? Like
Or
how
up
much
armored.
or up armored, right? Like how much
Yeah.
capability did the striker give you guys as you were dealing with that problem?
Yeah, that great point. And I was a light guy my entire career up
Mhm.
until I went to Fort Lewis or Joint Base Lewis McChord, and eye-opening for me because I wasn't a believer initially.
Mhm.
I think it was a very well-suited platform for a semi-permissive counterinsurgency environment. I think that I'm absolutely a believer in the Stryker fighting, the infantry fighting vehicle and the Stryker line of vehicles. Absolutely. When I looked around at other units that had up armored Humvees or even an MRAP, I liked the Stryker quite a bit because it was, I mean, I was in one that was 73 miles an hour. That thing can haul ass. It's
Mhm.
quiet. Yeah, it's not gonna stop a Javelin or an ATGM. It'll, of course, you put the cage on it. Yeah, it'll stop your RPG. But again, for that environment, it was a very capable combat vehicle and
Yeah.
it's a fighting vehicle. So a 50 or a Mark 19, not stabilized. So it's not like a Bradley has a stabilized cannon on there that you can shoot on the move. But for what it needed to do, uh, it was great. Plus, you put an entire infantry squad in the back, not 5
Exactly.
guys, not 5 dismounts, not 4 or whatever, or crammed into an up armored, which is far smaller. I'm a 6'3", but you get 4 people in an up armored. Okay, maybe 5 with a gunner. That's no good. I mean, it is what it is, but you try and bail out of that thing or dismount very quickly. You're fighting your weapon, you're getting caught. Drop a ramp on a striker, the guys can get out and roll fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So I was a believer in that environment. Yeah, I'm glad I was in a striker brigade combat team for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the AGS, the gun system was a 50 cal, right?
On the infantry fighting vehicle, it was a 50 or a Mark 19.
Yeah. Versus like a Bradley, which has a Bushmaster 25 millimeter. And in that environment, like you could do some serious damage. And that is counterproductive in a counterinsurgency, right? It's probably more
Well,
firepower than you need, right?
yes,
Mm-hmm.
it still had the coax. It still had the 7.62 coax, but I'm sure the guys that did Phantom Fury and some of the larger battalion brigade and even larger operations sure loved the firepower of that 25 Mike,
Yep.
right?
Of course.
But they appreciated its ability to provide devastating precision firepower
Yeah.
to enemy strongholds. Especially again like Fallujah and in some instances in places like Baghdad or Bakuba. Yeah, when the Bushmaster talks, man, the enemy is
Oh, it's
for
no
sure.
doubt. I did 2 years in a mech infantry brigade, and I love me some Bushmaster, man. And a tow
Yeah,
missile comes in handy too when you need to knock out a strong point.
right. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, everybody loves it, right? The same thing with a tank. Like when the 120 barks, when 70 tons of hate shows up, the enemy pretty quickly, he's not going to hang out for that. If he's smart, So yeah, tanks are cool. Tanks are cool when you need them. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You spoke very a little emotional when you talked about the poverty you saw in Albania.
Yes.
And could you talk a little bit about what life was like for a civilian living in Tarimiyya Diyala province during that time. What was it like for civilians living out there in that combat zone?
Yeah, I think that what I witnessed, people trying, and the folks that I met with, we had a Kada council and meet with them and hear their grievances, and they're trying hard scrabble life. People trying to, farmers working palm groves, trying to just get their lives to some semblance of normalcy. I mean, pleading with us for help with setting up like an internet cafe or a barber shop. And in the midst of also, behind the scenes, they were getting leaned on by AQI folks when we'd leave or whatever. Or maybe some of these guys were already compromised. And I know that we were probably, giving folks money that were actively a part of the insurgency. But I think that, the Iraqi people that I interacted with, and you look back with rose-colored glasses because some people can get very, they're all, as soon as we drive away, they're planting IEDs or they're telling
Sure.
them whatever. They're sure there were probably, 10% of those folks that were doing that. But I'm I'm of the opinion that a good 70% just wanted their lives back, just wanted normalcy.
Mhm.
And that if they weren't maybe on board with us, at least they were not against us. I mean, I hated taking things from people. I didn't. I don't know that's part of their culture. Sharing watermelon or a drink or something like that. I would try and bring candy, like we all did, right? Every time we're around the kids and bringing them something to eat or water, or just talk to them or bring comic books and stuff. This little boy was excellent at English and grateful that this guy's father let me talk with him because I was, I'd see him every time I go to a meeting. But I think it's like anywhere on the planet. They just want their lives back, and they just try and survive. Navigate between the waters of us trying to root out the insurgents and establish the governments, but then also the guys behind the scenes as soon as we leave that they have to answer to. So I fell for them. I did,
Yeah.
because it wasn't easy at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, very very tough.
I think in a lot of these like podcasts and so forth, it's very easy to overlook the plight of the civilians who found themselves, living in these areas. And I'm grateful that in your story you talk about it because it needs to be talked about. You know, this podcast does not exist to promote ideologies or promote policy, but what we do want to promote is understanding. And so, for folks at home who are listening to debates right now about potential invasions of countries and regime change. Again, we're not taking a stand here. It's not what we're here for. What we want people to do is to think about the lessons, the hard earned lessons of the past 25 years, man. That's all we ask.
Right.
It ain't cheap. It's expensive. And not just in terms of money, but in terms of blood. There's a whole generation of people, men and women who fought in these wars who are now going to be entering into the veterans healthcare pipeline, and that are going to be dealing with the invisible wounds of war. And you have to ask yourself, is that worth it?
Yeah.
To achieve that policy goal? And I think that, Mike, I don't speak for you, but I speak for myself. But I think that during our prep call, we talked about that. Like, veterans have a voice and sharing our perspectives and our lessons and what we learned as we talk about these things. At least we hope that they have a voice.
I violently agree with you, and I think that there's far too often there's binary thinking in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not R or D, or it's not my side, your side. It's what is best, what is overall best, and what's the objective, and let's think this through. We tend to polarize, right? And especially now in these times, we just pause and think this through because someone's going to pay the bill for this. And it ain't going to be you, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
You and I both can empathize with not only the people on the ground, they're going to be affected by it for the rest of their lives, but the young men and women that we send, of course.
Yep.
That they're going to have to live with that, or the tasks they're given, or the unattainable tasks that they're going to be given. And we just left 20 some years of war. We're going to get right back into this. What's the end state?
That's right.
What's the goal here? What are we after? And what does right look like? I harken back to OIF, just my experience, but the CENTCOM commander's end state. Regime change is a key task and establish new Iraqi governance. Okay. That's whatever, 12 words. Who's going to do that? And how long does that take? And what does that entail? And who's going to pick up? What all of all of that. We're going to do this again in another country that's with abject poverty. That those people are going to suffer even more now if we decide to, attack or do whatever, or to go for a regime change, for crying out loud. It's okay to question.
That's right.
It's okay to pause. It's absolutely, you're a patriot if you're not. You're a patriot if you do, and hold people accountable. So I agree with you.
100%,
Like I
man.
said, I agree with you.
Well, you and the rest of our teammates have earned the right to share those experiences. So good on you, man. So we're going to pivot now to our final stretch. Mike,
Yep.
I've kept you here long, but it's been really interesting, and thank you so much. I want to go back to the day that you decided. I remember very well when we're going to talk about life after the Army now. I remember the day that you did your retirement ceremony, man. Like people say that I have a memory, and I
You
do.
do.
I remember a lot of stuff, man. I'm not going to, that's your story. I'm not going to tell it. What came across to me is this man that I just absolutely loved and admired and saw as like, what I saw was a guy that like made a very difficult decision about when's the right time to leave. Right. And I saw the toll it took on you. I also saw that like up until the very last hour you were working, and I would go into your office like, boss, you got to like go to your appointments. You got to like take care of yourself. Right.
Yeah.
And you were just like that classic George Brett type of figure, man. You played all out. That's the only way you knew how to play. And I remember during your farewell address when you spoke to your troops, I remember thinking to myself, this guy's going to have a really tough time out of the Army because he is Mr. Army. That was my honest opinion, right? Like it's going to be tough for Mike because this is Mr. Army. But here you are, and you're doing well, man, and you're happy and you're healthy. And so what was that like decision-making process like for you? And what was it like for you to make that change?
Yeah, it was the most difficult decision of my life.
Mhm.
To walk away, as it probably is for all of us when we do a career. When is right, and how do you want to go out, and is this how I want to? What's the road ahead? If I stay in, what does that look like? And for me, I think if I had stayed, I would be constantly looking back. It's never going to be like it was my last. I would be spending too much time fondly remembering, previous assignments, because I just felt that I didn't have a purpose anymore. That the Army didn't have a purpose for me anymore, and it broke my heart. We're always told that you can love the Army, but it doesn't love you back, and it doesn't. I was I mean, you saw I was choked up. I was very emotional that day because I knew that I think is equally the Army who had told me that we don't have a purpose for a person like you anymore. And it wasn't about a promotion. It wasn't about that. It was just, I felt as though my services weren't required for where the Army was going. It was cognitive dissonance. It didn't, it's not that I had a moral disagreement with, what we were doing in Iraq or Afghanistan at the time. I didn't want to do that. It was nothing along those lines. I didn't agree with a lot of the way we were pursuing those objectives, and I didn't think that I wasn't really keen on it, but I felt so much like a dinosaur and I'm a very rigid person. You nailed it. I'm so rigid, and I have a hard time adjusting to, accepting certain things because it had been ingrained in me, as we talked about earlier, from day one. You have a standard, and you hold yourself to a personal standard, and you expect it around you, not just below you, but from your superiors as well. And when you don't see that, and it came to a point with me where I could no longer accept it. I would have to pull my car over on the drive in or going home at night, like we all did, and I would scream so I wouldn't take that home with me to my wife. 9 o'clock at night, pulling my truck over, put it in park, and just screaming as loud as I could in frustration. And then go home and eat a late dinner. And like we all did, right? We've had those jobs.
Yep.
And then you watch TV because you got to unwind for 45 minutes to an hour, crash, sleep, try restlessly for 5 hours, wake up and repeat. So I knew I had to go. I think probably had to do it to save myself maybe a little bit of sanity. That you're very wise. You saw right through me because the transition wasn't easy for me. I didn't prepare. I did everything wrong. I treated ETS like a PCS. I spent 2 weeks turning in equipment, going to a few appointments. I don't know if it was naive. I wasn't arrogant. I was naive. I thought that I'm a retired Army officer. I'll find it. Come on, I can get it. I can get a job easy like that. It's not going to be a problem. I didn't spend much time doing any preparation in that regard. And it was a good several months before I caught on, applying to a lot of jobs and frustrations. So, and finally happened.
Yeah.
Everybody does, but it was a very, very, very tough time. And it was a very tough time. I'll share this with anybody if you're listening, if you're a veteran. It was a very tough time for our marriage because it was instability. My wife was working, sure, but I was not working for the first time in my adult life. So, actually, since I was 13 or 14. I didn't have a job. Even though I was terminal leave and trying to find myself, I couldn't answer the question, what's your dream job? What do you want to do? And I used to tell people, I just did it. My dream job was, I just left my dream job. I don't know what I want to do out here. I don't know. I don't know. I can't answer that. I like working with people. I like working on projects. I like leading people. I like to manage stuff. I like operation. But I couldn't say that, man, I want to run a dump truck company and move heavy equipment, or I want to work for a railroad. I don't know. It was very, very rough time. And I sought counseling because I felt like I had no purpose anymore. Mid-40s, and I had no mission. I had no mission. I had no what now? So it's a tough thing if you don't do it right. And that's an understatement of the world, right? If you don't spend the time and talk to people and reach out to your network and use friends and ask them and humble yourself and really, really talk to people about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it can be just agonizing.
Yeah.
It was for several months for me, for sure.
Well, I sure as hell saw how hard you worked and how much you poured into every single hour. Forget every single day, every single hour. And I say the boys because it was all boys at the time. All the boys
Yeah.
in the back, like we were all aware of it. And you never once came in and said, hey, you guys need to get to work. And it wasn't your style. Like you led by example. It ain't easy doing that. Like it's easy to be a shitbag, but it's not easy to be that really solid example. And looking back, you were a lieutenant colonel. I was a major at the time. So it's not like I can go in there and shut the door and say, boss, you're screwing up. But like part of me really, because I was respectful, not just to rank the man, but also our corps was getting ready to deploy and you were doing a lot of things to help us with that. But looking back, I wish I did, honestly, because what we were always told as officers was, hey, when your NCOs are getting ready to retire, you just got to create the space for them to be able to give them that time. And I always thought in the back, of course we did that, but I always thought in the back of my head, is someone going to do that for me? Right. When I'm a lieutenant colonel working on something that's really important to keep the headquarters, to keep the troops, is anyone going to do that for me? And the answer was no. And I guess I wish that someone had grabbed you by the scruff of your neck and said, hey, Mike, we're pulling you out of the job and we're going to make you a special projects officer and you're going to go and you're going to take care of yourself and the family and you're going to network. To me, that's the right answer for taking care of your people. So you're doing well now. So what are you up to these days in Charleston? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. So I'm not there anymore, but for almost 10 years, I was of all things, I was an operations director on a aircraft carrier museum here in Charleston Harbor. Yeah, so it was on the USS Yorktown. It's a state-run museum, so it also has a destroyer there, but it was really cool. And I hit it off when I applied for the job. It was just a state website, like, director of whatever. I'd apply for it. And I went through the whole process, state application, and got the call. My boss was a retired Navy captain. I only got the job because I hit it off with this guy. We spent like 5 hours in the initial interview because he was a gregarious. I love this man. He was wonderful. I say he was. Sadly, he passed away, but he was a great, great guy. And for 5 hours, we just sat across the table at his desk, and we were just. The interview went away after about an hour, and I just really liked this guy. I hit it off. Army guy. I don't know anything about ships. I don't like starboard, like all the Navy terms. And it is all staffed by retired naval dudes, retired chief warrant officer, all this kind of stuff. Blah, blah, blah. It was an amazing job. I loved it. It was really, really cool. I learned a lot about the Navy. That was the one service I had practically no interaction with. You know the deal. We worked with the Air Force all the time. Marine Corps, far less, but at least they were similar to us. The Navy was a mystery. Like, I don't know. I worked with them a lot. Even though it was a retired ship and a retired vessel, we did a lot with the local Navy folks and just to repair the ship and how it had to be done. It was a very cool job, but that ran its course after about 9 years. I realized I had to move on.
Mhm.
Like I said, it was a state entity,
Mhm.
and not to bag on state entities, but you're fighting the same battles every single year with funding and
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. And I kind of like, am I going to do this? Is this it? Is this so? I left about not too long ago, and I yearned to train guys again. So I'm a growed bag contractor, but I go train battalion and brigade staffs on operations, everything from targeting to MDMP to whatever the TOC operations. And I work with young majors and lieutenant colonels and captains on anything. We just kind of like a mentorship role. So I'm the movement maneuver guy for them, and it's fun, man. I go up to Bragg or I go out to Campbell or I mostly Eastern Seaboard, but we'll work with the National Guard a lot too. Great Americans, great guys, and I enjoy it. I'm on a small team, hotel life, maybe 2, 3, 4 trips a month. Outside of that, I'm here. It's good. It's good for right now. I'm enjoying it.
That's awesome, man. Like, I remember when I got out, I told myself, and it was completely stupid, but this is the kind of boneheaded decision making I made. I was like, oh, I'm not going to be a contractor. When I get out, I want to do something completely different. And that's what I'm doing now. Right. And
Yeah,
I love it. I love
yeah.
it because it's like my boss said at one time, it's like you get to do all the fun shit in the Army without all the sucky stuff. Right.
Let's go. Like I'm gonna go to the hotel now.
Right.
Go. We're gonna go watch the game
Right. Right.
and have
Right.
a few beers at the hotel. But you guys keep rocking.
Right. Right.
Yeah, dressed like this or whatever,
That's
ball
right.
cap and just
That's
right on,
right.
guys, right on.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
I've so funny. I agree with you. I was like, I'm not living like, and I'm not looking down my nose. I have a ton of friends that
Mhm.
retired right there at Bragg or they up in the Beltway or whatever. And when I first left, I'm not doing that. I'm breaking away. I'll make it in the civilian world. Okay. And I did. I worked at a museum for a while, but
Mhm.
when you're in your mid 40s and you spent, whatever, 20 plus years in an industry, what are you going to do, bud? You're going to drive a taxi or an Uber. It's slim pickings unless you decide to, God forbid, man, there's some great guys, entrepreneurs, start their own business. I know some fellows that did a full career and amazing entrepreneurs. Just holy crap, man. Love them. And I high five them every time I see them because they just the drive to do it, made their businesses. Bush hogging or something like that. Like I just love it, man. I clear a fleet of, like guys working for him, bush hogging and doing all over the country, like landscaping and stuff. He's crushing, guys are crushing it, doing awesome.
Yeah.
So God bless him, man.
How do you
I don't know.
stay in touch with the guys whenever you need someone to talk to? Or that's an important,
Yeah.
it's a constant theme I keep hearing is how do you stay centered? And I keep hearing contact with my teammates. Do you still keep in touch with the boys?
You have to. I'll tell you, even from I've got a reunion in 2 weeks up at Bragg, my first the unit that went to Sinai.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those guys were all meeting. A lot of former fellow, ex-platoon leaders, company commanders, some of the staff NCOs, former battalion XO. We're all going to meet up there and hang out, go see the Airborne Special Ops Museum, and then go to the battalion headquarters. But it's more than that. It's just barbecuing and hanging out by the pool and having a few pops with those guys because we text all the time. Like I have text groups of dudes. It's just the way it is now, right? Everybody
Yeah.
texts and it's typically sports season. So it's
Yeah.
everything from football to baseball. Some guys are in that. Some guys are into shooting sports. So we're texting about that and guns and the boys the guys from Italy, from the 173rd. I got a group. Did a reunion with them last year. We're going to do one this spring. The 49 guy, the striker unit, trying to throw one together for next summer. So yeah, we got to stay in touch.
Yeah.
And you got to be the forcing function and not sit on your hands with those guys. I used to there was a dark period, right? Where like, they don't want to hear from me or, I don't want to bug them or I don't want to, the hell they don't want to hear from you.
No.
They do want to hear from you. And they do want that sense of humor that you used to have. I realized that I got to get over that because there was a time, I'm sure you probably went down that road. Like, you kind of withdraw a little bit. You find yourself withdrawing. you got to not, I'm saying this to myself, to kick the door open and reach out to them and be the driver if you're not heard from them in a while.
Yeah.
Because they're dying to hear from you. I mean, they really are. They're happy, not dying, but they're happy to hear from you.
Yeah.
And you fall right back in on it. And I'm glad I do. I realize that. And my wife pokes me on that. Like she's been pretty good about supporting it. Never gives me a hard time about doing, well, I'm gonna go link up with these guys, or we're gonna go do that. So
That's awesome,
I
brother.
think it's vital.
Mike, I've taken too much of your time.
No.
I can't tell you, man, just how much I admire you. Just one of the best bosses. You had a great impact on me as a man, as an officer. And to have you here sharing your experiences for this project, it means the world to me. I hope that people will take what you said and they will apply it to whether they're currently in the military, apply it to their day to day as they're leading policymakers. They listen to what you said about, you know, about about just how difficult nation building is and regime change is, but also for guys who are out and, they saw a guy that was deeply committed to the organization who made the transition, and they maybe take away a little something from that as well. And it helps them as they make that big jump. But the next time I'm down in Charleston, man, I'll definitely have to grab you by the scruff of the neck, and we can link up and reconnect and tell some lies, man. Think
I
the
hope
world
so.
of you, my brother. You're a
Thank you.
good
You know that
man.
it's mutual. It's 100% mutual. And I mean that sincerely. I respect you so much. I think that you're a guy that ate a lot of shit when I first showed up there. And if you recall that, and I know that a lot of folks don't understand the context, it was in Korea during that exercise. And I showed up as the chops, and I'll never forget just watching you get railed by the chief of staff for just every little thing that went from the weather to, whatever. It was just ridiculous. And you endured so much shit that I realized, you were in my shop, and I'm like, all right, I kind of got fed up with it. I was getting you get protective, like who
Mm-hmm.
hands off my guy, So I respected you so much, man, because you have so much energy and drive. And I don't know if you sleep at 2 hours. You must be one of those guys that doesn't sleep at 2 hours a day. You're never not moving. You're never not, ex, you know, trying to learn or make yourself a better person in all facets. I tell you, you say those great, humbling things about me. Everybody I worked with at Corps, I was the dead weight. You and Vinny and a lot of those guys, those majors that worked in that shop were insane iron horses that like I couldn't keep up with that
Oh,
crew. That all you guys were highly talented rock stars. Just incredible.
I would expect nothing less from you, that kind of response, Mike. But all I'd say is there were nights like 9 o'clock at night, I'd go home and I'd still see that light on. You were such a iron, man. You're a piece of iron, but you're also a great friend. And thank you so much, Mike. And I'll tell you what, I'd love to have you back on again. If
Yeah,
there's a topic that inspires you or interests you or something you want to talk about, I'm game. You know how to get a hold of me, brother.
you know it.
All
You know
right.
it. I would love to. Yeah, man,
All right.
for sure.
All
Thank
right,
you
Mike.
very
Thank you
much.
so much. All right.